Yeah, I don't know, man. You ever just feel like life is just catapulting towards some greater purpose?
Pampered fat cats with bloated ego. We are the only DJ crazy enough to tattoo Jackie Brown on his ass.
This is Michael Mann, and I ride with
Extended Clip.
Welcome to Extended Clip. I am one of your hosts, Eddie Averill.
I'm Malcolm Baum.
I'm JT White.
And 257 episodes in, we are finally talking about Ingmar Bergman's Persona. Spine, probably number one. I'm not going to check on that, but it's like, that's got to be the first Criterion movie, right? When you think about kind of art house movies and this style of European mid-century art house movie, this is kind of what you think of. And I don't know, we never really get that deep into this kind of thing. When we talk about Godard, we often talk about the later works. We've talked about some early, more out there Bergman. We've talked about later Ozu, who's not even European, of course. And it's not like we've done any like 60s Fellini. So I feel like now, 4 years into the podcast, it's finally time to go to Film 101, break out the Janus Films 101 Essential Films book or whatever, and get down to fucking business.
Yeah, no, I'm excited because this is, obviously, as everyone has pointed out before us, it's a great movie, and I feel like it's just it's so exact in what it's trying to do that it feels so dense with meaning. And I feel like a reason why it's popular is that it's very, like, I don't know, teachable in a way, or something like Citizen Kane. Like, it's the reasons why it's great is like kind of obvious, and I don't know, there's a lot to talk about there, and so I'm ready to get into it.
JT, had you watched this one? I know you had your like kind of artsy film education earlier than both of us. Is Persona something you watched as like an adolescent, or was that more like college?
No,
when you watched it?
I was probably you're right on the money. I was probably like 13 or 14 when I watched Persona for the first time. I feel like that was the last time I really had a big Bergman moment, and this. I don't know. There are a few things I feel like will come up when watching this in terms of like revitalizing me to be like, oh wow, like this dude is actually the shit, and like I want to dive a little bit deeper in the filmography, because it is something where it's just like, especially with Bergman, I mean, it feels silly to say, and I feel like it's kind of somewhat reflective of our niche film circle. But even expanding out larger, it does feel like Bergman's influence on like art house movies has kind of waned, aside from like very broadly like parodied Seventh Seal, like chess game with death moments that seem to always continue to pop up. But I don't know. It's like Woody in particular is obviously citing like Bergman all the time, but it feels like he's less vital to a lot of filmmakers nowadays.
Oh, come on. Rifkin's Festival was enjoyed by dozens.
There's a youthful vitality to Rifkin's
exactly.
Festival, if anything, right?
The Bergman homage in that one was really just like Film School 101 for a whole new generation.
Exactly. So, I mean, I don't want to downplay it too much, but it's just like,
yeah.
I remember not watching this, but like Wild Strawberries, I saw it for the first time on like my home like desktop computer on like early days of like Netflix streaming, and I loved that. And then shortly afterwards I did Persona, and I don't know, going back to it now, it's one of those movies where it's just like, obviously I missed a lot watching it at like 13 or 14. But I loved it, and I still do now, and it makes me want to go a little bit deeper into Bergman's work and do stuff that is not like just what he has canonized, and even like the canonized work, revisit that too, because I haven't been giving him his due.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, you say like his influence, right? Because obviously, like, you think of like the Woody Allen movies where he made like dramas or whatever, and like this Persona, like, does Bergman have a lot of movies like Persona? Would you say? No, I don't. I think
It doesn't seem like it. I've seen
Yeah.
maybe 8 of his movies, and I know that Prison is another one that deals with filmmaking, which, you know, people forget that Persona is kind of a movie about filmmaking if you take the introduction montage to kind of take the mindset for the whole movie. And, you know, obviously you're thinking about an actress throughout this film as well. But from what I've seen, this is the only Bergman like that. But I also think Bergman, he has a sneaky deep bag, as
Yeah,
it were. Like, I feel like
absolutely.
every time I watch another Bergman, I really just can't believe what I'm seeing, because I didn't expect it from the guy who did Sawdust and Tinsel and Winterlight and The Seventh Seal. Especially Sawdust and Tinsel, I remember as like a 19-year-old, just that was straight tryptophan. Like, I fill me with stuffing, I'm done, you know. But then when I watched Smiles of a Summer Night, I was floored, and I was like, oh, it's not just like the surreal stuff and the big human question stuff that Woody Allen takes from Bergman, but there's also this movie, which is just like a brilliant partner swapping romantic comedy, and I just like don't expect that. And then you get Persona, which is like, you know, after the totally dour religious stuff of something like Winterlight, which frankly I am not a fan of, to get so deep into psychoanalysis instead of religion, and to take such a radical aesthetic form instead of that fucking dour form that Schrader kind of copies for First Reformed in a way that I like in First Reformed. I just find this to be such a mind blower every time I watch it, because every time I watch it, I've seen more Bergman, and I just come back to this and realize, no, this really is a one of one. I can't find anything like it in cinema or his cinema.
Well, you know, I feel like I bring that up just because I feel like his influence is maybe more felt with this film alone, and kind of like obviously with May December getting released, but there's a lot of other movies kind of like that, like the two women kind of psychologically profiling each other up, and kind of there's a lot of movies that, you know, have that template, you know what I mean? And it's a tried and true template. There's a lot of great movies that kind of came from
We've
that
covered
structure.
multiple of them
Yeah.
on this podcast. We've done Three Women, which is Altman's Persona riff. Did we do an episode on Face Off? Or have we just
No,
talked
we
about
haven't yet.
Face Off? Okay. I know Face Off has been the subject of some middle episodes, but yeah, Face Off, you know, now May December, of course, Mulholland Drive, Three Women, the list goes on. There are plenty of filmmakers have done their Persona homage, but also I feel like the intro of Persona has been copied and has influenced more than almost anything. Like, that's what just like the stereotype of more out there art house films is the beginning of Persona, but it's so arresting and so precise and so just vital that it's beyond parody, you know. Even if The Simpsons or Cheers or any like comedy TV show can do something along those lines to show like a crazy surrealist filmmaking thing as a joke, it will never lose its punch for me.
How it, you know, bookends and kind of like the middle of the movie, like it's done in a way that's just, it's like kind of like, I don't know, just the right amount, you know what I mean? Like, and especially, you know, I saw this like 4.5 months ago in a theater, it was screening, so I'm kind of glad we're doing this and I got a chance to rewatch it, because I feel like I, you know, really know the movie now. And like, just that the intro really is kind of like arresting, because I kind of forgot about it, and like it, you know, when it hits, it kind of, you know, it kind of reminds me of like a Kenneth Anger movie or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it shows that, yeah, I think you're right with kind of like Bergman's past filmography. It kind of tunes you in right off the bat that he's tapping into something a little bit different here than he is the rest of his movies, something a little bit more modern, cutting edge, and, you know, the intro fits that.
Psychoanalysis and cinema were basically co-invented at like the turn of the century in Europe. It's like you got the Lumieres in France and you got Freud in Austria, and it's this confluence of human ideas, and it takes a while for people to really put two and two together with these two new fields. There's the primitive associations that you make, and there's obviously people were thinking a bit about psychoanalysis early on, but then you get like 50s movies like Douglas Sirk and Nicholas Ray, those big melodramas that are so psychoanalytically dense, but that's all beneath the surface, right? And I feel like it takes until the mid-century art house stuff like this to really see these two forms like intersect at a level like this. The opening is all about mental associations and the psychoanalytic phenomenon of editing, of montage. Montage theory isn't just about brainwashing communists. It's about like digging into the human psyche and figuring out what's going on up there. And so we obviously see this series of images, whether there's a man's penis or a little boy's cartoon fantasy or anything like that, or Jesus's hands, or I guess we just see hands getting nailed to a board, and you assume it's Jesus's hands getting nailed to the sides of the cross, and it's just all of these things that would influence the psychoanalysis, the psyche of a person born and raised on this time period where Bergman has lived. You see, World War II and even TV footage of Vietnam that makes it not really exist in a vacuum, but makes it a little more urgent. Like, oh, this is like a mid-60s movie. We are seeing this in a time where people are conscious of Westerners, just pillaging the Southeast Asia. And yeah, I just think that like these two ideas of psychoanalysis and filmmaking kind of building up to this moment of both internalizing a person's brain through montage and just demonstrating the capabilities of character analysis and how deep you can get in interiority through direction and performance with these two characters is just like stunning. I mean, it's we haven't really talked about what the movie's about, right? But we can keep going like this if you want.
Yeah. Again, before we dive too much into it, like the plot, I mean, which I feel like there is very sparse. I feel like it is kind of a film that like works more for like jumping off of. But even like this time, I was really taken aback by like things like even like production design, because I feel like it's like so purposefully kind of sparse and like cold, especially in like the hospital stuff at the very beginning, where it gets so into that like kind of dream-like setting. And I mean, certainly like there's a lot of it like later where it's like camera work where it's just like you're only watching like two faces like framed against each other, but like I don't know, that alone like gets you into that like weird like dream-like headspace.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a doctor or if she's just an older nurse, but the female nurse character that's not Alma, that's kind of like giving her the directions at the beginning of the movie. It is very dreamlike and like kind of just like direct, and like just kind of, I thought it was funny like the way she was telling her job. It kind of sounded like the Mission Impossible intro, like
you're getting a debriefing.
She's getting like debriefed and like told like her mission, like we just cut into it, and it's, I don't know, I just thought it was kind of funny that like it's what JT's saying, it gives like an off-kilter atmosphere. Like it's almost like she kind of like knows something that she doesn't, like she like almost like she knows that Alma's about to go on like this insane psychological journey.
But at the same time, I think Alma knows that she's in for something out of the ordinary dealing with this actress. We get that very quick pan down to her hands from the shot of the back of Alma's head. And we see her like twiddling her hands like girlishly, and it's Bergman showing us that she's like, oh shit, I could just take care of this big famous actress who lost her power of speech. Fuck yeah, let's get crazy, like it's almost like as you said, Malcolm, like the beginning of an action movie where you're getting debriefed on your mission. You get that little tingling of excitement there, knowing you're in for some crazy shit. About what the movie's about, so obviously you have this story of a woman who has lost the power of speech and a nurse who tries to take care of her psychological games ensue, if you will. But it's like, what do you really get out of saying a plot of a movie like this? So I wanted to read something from Jonathan Rosenbaum about like narrative and non-narrative films. When the synopsis straitjacket became impossible, an actual form of censorship was when I had to impose it on Dreyer's Vampire, a movie that can be read as a paraphrasable story only if one ignores all the syntactical contradictions in its construction. Thanks to my own subliterary training, this is an aspect of the film that I was literally unable to see or hear until I started examining the film closely. A plot summary in this case represents a refusal to look at the film closely, a smoothing over and flattening out of all the discontinuities that confuse the spectator's unconscious bridge work with the actual substance of Vampire. He then lists a bunch of other films that fit into that category, Persona being one of them. But yeah, we talk a lot about like plot structure and stuff like that on this film, and there's films that just completely break the mold of that and are so arresting on a moment-to-moment basis. And it's almost like the filmmaker knows it's that arresting on a moment-to-moment basis that they don't have to play by any narrative conventions, and they know that you are going to just be in the pocket for every scene.
Yeah, well, I mean, I watched a little supplemental materials. Something I actually don't often do, but I saw a little Bergman interview on Persona, and it's actually funny because they ask him if there's some new style to your movie. Is it like Godard inspired? And he's like, no, I actually hate that guy. And he's actually, to be honest, I never saw him in an interview before. He kind of has a very normal guy disposition that I guess I would have expected maybe, but I don't know. It was just a kind of he was very satisfied with his answers in the interview, and it was about Persona, the interview, and they're asking him, the classic, "What's this movie about, man? I can't figure it out." He's like, "Well, I kind of left it open so you could take your own interpretation." You know what I mean? Like, it's obviously, Bergman agrees. And obviously anyone watching it could take that from it, but even himself, it's like, yeah, there's no nothing really happens, but it's about what happens when nothing happens, so it's it was just funny seeing Bergman in an interview and kind of getting answers. I like when there was talk shows, asking directors about like Persona and something like that. It's kind of a throwback there.
Bergman joins the couch, Rodney Dangerfield has to scoot over.
Yeah, exactly. Swedish, the Swedish version of him.
Swedish Rodney Dangerfield. Not going to do a voice, but let's just say this is a guy who doesn't get any meatballs.
I was thinking, I'm like, where to go with that?
Where's it going? Yeah.
Back to that opening barrage of images, I just feel like it's great how that image of the boy reaching out to the screen, once you realize you're in a hospital, it almost feels like that could be almost anything. Like that could be another room in the hospital, not just like the framing of the whole movie. Because of how like sterile and white and everything is. And that just made me think about how it could also represent the birth of a person, which often, I don't know if you guys know this, happens at a hospital. And so it's this thing where it's equating the birth of the thinking human with film. You have these film reels running the whole time and these cuts jumping in. And as I said, cartoons and pornographic images and war images and animal slaughter. And it's like everything that a person in the mid-century would be afraid of, I guess, kind of on his beau is afraid type shit. But it's great how it's so like off kilter and like, I don't know, angular cutting on like weird sound effects and shit. And it just gets you ready for a much more locked down and slower approach. And I just love that dynamic between the two forms.
On a more like juvenile level, with like the penis being in there, just thinking about that, like, do you think like people in the 60s, that probably might have been the first time people saw the penis in a movie theater like that? You know what I mean? I don't know how popular Persona was. Like, I don't know if, like, you hear back in the day, like, Fellini was a little bit more popular amongst American people than, you know, it usually...
I feel like Persona was definitely, like, an art house hit. So I definitely buy that that's the first...
It played the New
you're
York
seeing
Film
on the screen.
Festival. You know, it opened in Sweden before. What I'm thinking is, you know, how big are these screens in Sweden? And is this the biggest penis that these people have ever seen in their life?
It's huge. Like
Attack of the 50-foot penis.
Like the train in, like, the 1800s, the Train movie, like how everyone...
Oh, I was going to say the train from The Greatest Show on Earth and The Fableman. You see...
the train from The Fableman.
Seeing the penis in Persona and then going to recreate that at home.
Yeah. And then, like, trying to get your mom and dad to do it, but your mom's just doing it with your dad's best friend. And you make that intro to Persona footage of that. Movies are like dreams that you, I hope, not forget, because you're going to have to talk about them for hours upon hours in therapy.
Yeah, I mean, the penis, I feel like, is honestly a good jumping off point for, like, something. I mean, I want to get into...
Yeah, he's using that shit as a diving board.
Because I want to get into the monologue, but it has something that, like, because I'm also as juvenile as Malcolm, I was thinking something throughout the whole movie. I was like, Bergman low-key a freak. Oh, you a freak. Like, I was thinking that, like, so often.
Yeah, do you know how many kids were in film school watching that scene where she's describing, you know, the boys at the beach and everything? Like, how many binders were covering the laps of young film students?
That, like, it was, and I mean, I've seen other Bergman movies, and I can understand why, like, someone like Woody takes away, like, oh, this guy has everything. Like, he, like, philosophy, religion, sex, and it's just, like, he is hitting on it all, like, in, like, not all in, I mean, in Persona, kind of, like, hitting on it all in a variety of ways, but, like, throughout his filmography, and, like, with a great deal of, like, depth, and that is something that, like, I don't know, it's been a few years since I've seen Persona. My memory of the movie was relatively, like, foggy, other than, like, obviously the montage opening. And I had completely, like, forgotten about that monologue, and I was scandalized. I was like, "What? Like, that's crazy."
Scandalized.
Yeah, it's
How could they
she's
do
talking
that
about
to her?
fucking little boys on the
Well,
beach.
true. It is a.
Oh, is that
She's a
not
pedophile.
scandalous to you, Malcolm?
She's a
Is that a thing in the
pedophile. We
park?
got her.
Well, they
That's
don't say that the boys are underage.
very.
She
She
says
says
younger
very,
boys.
very. She says
very
very young. Very.
That's true. If a mid-century European says very young, that means like 12.
I think varies
Yeah.
like the guilty part, right? Like if you're in the court, it's like, what does very mean? Like very means like under something, right? Under some.
You
sort
were
of
right.
limit.
Woody Allen would think he has it all.
I you know, in a day and age where everyone's trying to round up the pedophiles, I think I might angrily comment on the Criterion Persona page, being like, no one's exposing, you know, the people in this movie.
Frankly, I think people trying to round up the pedophiles, that's like passe at this point.
True, we moved on. Nobody cares. On to the next thing.
So the instructions are given, the debriefing is done, and very early on, visually, we're introduced to this idea kind of as the face as a landscape. And it's funny to think about because it's almost the opposite of the way that Antonioni did this in La Ventura and that whole trilogy with Monica Vitti. Bergman will just kind of use someone's face to take up half of the frame as if it's a mountain or something like that. And he uses all these weird cockeyed angles with people laying down and, you know, bending their head down in very specific ways. And he's really, he's taking from pretty much everyone, like around him. I would say he's using Antonioni and Bresson as his contemporary influences here, especially with the way that he uses the actors as models in some of these scenes with these very unnatural gestures that are really only there for the sake of perfect framing and, dissolves, and the way that he's using very precise lighting. And in that sense, I would say, the lighting and the chiaroscuro of the black and white and the texture of the lighting, really the only comparison point I can think of is like Mizoguchi, maybe. I don't know anything else that looks like this.
Well, it is the black and white in this movie is like, this is like one of the great, like, modern, black and white movies. The lighting of everything, what Eddie's mentioning, and like the darkness of everything just really gives it, really leans into its like black and white look. And like, it's also a great example of like form meeting, what's going on in the story, even though it is somewhat light. Kind of like, Bergman is still giving you a tether, it's not so experimental, where it's like, it's playing off the tension of these two women, and kind of, with one being silent and Alma kind of, just talking and kind of spilling her desires, projecting herself onto her, doing everything in the book with her as, she kind of just remains silent and she just keeps talking. There's like this tension that meets kind of all the film techniques that Bergman's working with here, and just a real like masterful way. And like it brings up a very specific mood. Mizoguchi is also a good comparison, because they feel, there's halfway through the movie there's like a scene where it's almost like one of them's a ghost, or what, kind of walking around the house and whatnot. And
the late night visit is what I was thinking about with Mizoguchi, especially when the actress Vogler comes into Sister Alma's room, and Sister Alma later is convinced that it was just a dream, because she doesn't cop to it, and who knows what actually happened. But the amount of, like, I don't know if it's just the fog and the deepness of the blacks and all the different shades of gray, it's so fantastic. And there's so many scenes where, as Malcolm said, the form matches the content, and he's playing with only 2 or 3 tones between black and white. It's like a very high contrast movie in some scenes, and then some scenes you have like a million different shades of gray, and it's very dissolve heavy. And I just love how Bergman is just running the gamut aesthetically here, from the slow creeping shots to the very still scenes, all still shot scenes, to obviously the more rapid stuff, and then once in a while a very rushed camera movement to track along with the body, always kind of like jolts you into place a little bit. So they go to the island, and the first thing they do on the island is mushrooming. And so I think that with, mid-60s counterculture stuff becoming more popular in arts, this is a conscious reference towards the psychedelic, and like what's going to entail on this. I know Bergman is a straight-laced religious Swede, but I just think that in terms of the form and the content of the film and the kind of jagged psychosis that it creates is very psychedelic at points. And it reminded me of Phantom Thread, honestly, the activity of the two people in the strangely power-shifting codependent relationship, and mushroom foraging being a key part of it there.
Yeah, if he didn't get it all, he just basically said Bergman had to be on shrooms to make this crazy movie.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course.
No, I thought that...
Yeah.
Also, her name's Alma in Phantom Thread.
Oh, shit.
So
The
for
Alma
whatever
connection.
that's worth. Yeah.
That's +5 right there. That
That's a multiplier.
yeah, that makes the comparison go +5. Where like with Phantom Thread, like it kind of focuses on like one shift, whereas this one, like I love how erratic it is from scene to scene, kind of based off nothing, right? Based off certain things, right? Like Alma does like read a letter at somewhat like near the halfway point of the movie where the actress character is like writing to the hospital being like, oh, I'm actually studying her, you know what I mean? And the different ways that it pinballs around with the power dynamics, and how obviously Alma gets so kind of erratic and feels, going through different stages of like psychosis, or I don't know what the exact mental term mental term or medical term would be, you know, because I'm not a doctor. We're not doctors.
We're
here.
dropping mad mental terms on this episode.
We're
bro.
getting psychological. We're opening up the DSM
Psychological,
textbooks.
psychedelic,
Yeah, exactly. This
DSM x DXM,
is exactly.
robo tripping, reading about fucking Frasier.
That's the type of shit we're on with it. But the movie requires it, and it just like the seemingly where each other stands, it could change from minute to minute.
So as they kind of get into these kind of familiar rhythms on the island, Alma goes about her kind of chores about the place and is just talking her head off because she finally has someone to listen to her. And the person who's listening to her happens to be a famous actress who she can kind of like project all of her things onto, like people do at the movies, of course. So she's projecting all of her problems onto this actress. She's giving her the sauciest stories, the most melodramatic stories, the most semi-spiritual stories, I guess, just like everything that informs her as a person, and that of course includes the story about the boys at the beach, the infamous erotique scene about the boys at the beach, and it's just all dialogue, and I really do think it's a big accomplishment for someone as I guess not sterile, but sometimes sterile as Bergman to pull something off like that. I really thought it was tremendous, because whereas other films may demonstrate male impulses, and female too, but like sex impulses or so, this is the only time that a sense of eroticism that I've seen has actually been achieved in his movies.
Yeah, I guess like he was famous for like there's like someone nude in like Summer at Monaco. So I guess maybe that's like he's got a bit of an erotic reputation in the States, but yeah, this is obviously something different and is something that like is great because we don't see any of it. It's like a story that's passed on, and just kind of the powerful silence of the actress as it's kind of like eggs her to keep going, and like how the story's presented, and then like kind of like how she feels about it after she tells it is just it's very complex. Like it's an erotic tale, but it also at the end it kind of feels like a strange like kind of like confession too, what I mean? And it's very young, that's kind of suspect, I get, so do with that what you will.
She's recounting like cheating on her. Is it like fiance at that?
That's what that's what most of the guilt is about. Is that she cheated on her fiance, not that the boys were too young. I think you might be getting your wires crossed on May-December a little too hard there.
I'm focusing too much on, but it's it's just funny that it's there, but it's not really like a part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they don't care. They're Swedish.
It's kind of the that's my boy approach, where it's like good on him.
No, I saw a Bergman interview, and he described the scene as erotic. You know what I mean? So he was getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be a lost in translation thing on the very, very young thing. I don't think it's supposed to be a pedophilic
Yeah,
scene.
I'm kind of joking about that, but it does say very young, so it is kind of like, okay, that's maybe a small,
and I mean, like, she's like relatively young too. Like, I don't know.
Look, the heart wants what it wants. So this scene, though, it does you calling it like a confession is very appropriate, though, because this is what leads her to her most vulnerable point, Alma, that is, and like she said all she can about her life already, and complained about her partner, and like complained about her work, and told her whole story. So now it's like, now I have to bear this thing out where, she's basically doing it as therapy, using the actress as her mirror, using Elisabeth Vogler, the actress, as her mirror. And so it's at this most vulnerable point that she breaks down and just starts sobbing after telling the story, because the story ends with her getting an abortion, and you're not knowing for sure whether the child was that of the boys at the beach or her husband, who she went home to and slept with that same night. it's at this point that she breaks down and starts crying and proposes the question, is it possible to be two people at once? And at the time, maybe you're thinking about her aborted potential child, like it being the child of both of those fathers or something like that. But I think it's in that moment where the actress Elizabeth sees her, kind of shifting gears in terms of their relationship, asking that question. And that is the first time that she speaks throughout the whole movie. And she says, go to bed. And then we see that late night visit once Alma goes to bed. And I just think that passage between the monologue, the breakdown, and the late night visit, which is played like a ghostly visitation, is to me the strongest part of the movie, full of masterful strokes.
No, yeah, I mean, that's where the movie kind of like, you don't want to say transcend because it sounds like it's better than, but it goes to, especially topping it with like the ghostly visit. It's like, okay, this has like almost like a horror movie vibe to it, or kind of like this is reaching into, this is not just like the concrete mental problems and them, talking and dealing with the difficulty. It's like it becomes something, like you said, psychedelic, strange, and like it hits a different chord that like I feel like I feel like a lot of movies weren't hitting at the time, so like it's, I mean, still now, to be honest. So it kind of it goes into an even more like thrilling space, and like the rest of the movie is like, stuff is like very unclear, and you kind of have to stew in that uncertainty. And I think that's a very powerful technique, because it is like like you're talking about earlier, if you synopsize this movie, you could be very like, well, nothing happened in the movie. They just they just sat around and were paranoid or whatever, But it's like Bergman takes great lengths formally to put you in that space with the characters.
So this mirror scene is kind of the first breaking point of the movie, if you will. It's where the movie within the movie that is being projected in that first 5 minutes, starts to like fall in upon itself. And then it's almost like we got too experimental. We got to bounce back to some traditional narrative. And so that's when Sister Alma intercepts the letter. And it's a very, like, I don't know, gossipy, like almost immature bit of conflict going on there with the stolen letter and the, studying her behind her back and all of that. And I kind of like that as a counterpoint to as transcendent and like meditative as it got before that and will get after. But I feel like the letter intercepting is like that mode of the movie is what May December is pulling from, rather than, the slower, quiet scenes. And that's fine. Like, I like that about May December. Yeah. But I like that it has its roots here,
Yeah. Also, the scenes where the two women stare at each other, what I mean?
Well, I was going to get into the the infamous mirror scene, of course. Yeah. Well, that late night visit starts the infamous mirror scene, where they are just like taking this weird pose, combing each other's hair with their hands, and then their necks kind of intertwine like cranes as it fades to black. And there's a symbolic reading of one person passing into another, and of course when she wakes up, it's like, did you visit my room last night? Nah. The texture of the film is like building up so much, and then the projection seems to break, and it's so crazy how the swap just like, you can't tell. Has the swap began? Has it been canceled? Is it like, what's going on with what does it mean for the projection of this movie to seemingly break and these effects to come in? And I love how open it is to interpretation. And then the next day we get that great scene at the beach, which is just like one of the most sparse pieces of like design and cinematography in the film. You really just get like rocks, sky, water, one person, and that's it. And it just looks so gorgeous. So then as the film winds down, the last 30 minutes or so, we basically just get this sequence of fake outs, dream sequences, false endings, all these crazy things where you're not sure whose perspective you're looking into for these little fantasies. One of them is the husband of the actress, Mr. Vogler, showing up. But then, in this version, the two characters have swapped. And Mr. Vogler's like telling Sister Alma, come home, I'm your husband. And, if you're watching it not realizing that someone's about to wake up from a dream, you're thinking that the rug has been pulled out from under you for this whole movie, and these two people were the opposite of what you thought. And there's variations on this throughout, and there's just like this double dream sequence, and it just keeps getting deeper and deeper into a rabbit hole until you get this like reverse shot close-ups of Alma and Elizabeth, and she just like kind of has this self-actualization moment, Alma that is, she's just like, I'm not Elizabeth, I'll never be like you, I change all the time. And that statement just undercuts what she's saying, because like if she's saying I'll never be like you, but I change all the time because I am just whoever I want to be, it's like, no, you just became the actress then, and I love how that works, and how neither side really wins, but it just feels so sinister.
The layering of abstraction that Bergman puts on, like in the back end of the movie, it is kind of like it is almost like you're trying to find like maybe a through line, you know what I mean? You're trying to put your detective hat on. You're like, what's this about? And like he just kind of any sort of thread, he lays there. It gets scrambled, and it's just very impressive of how, like I said before, how just the dynamic just keeps shifting and shifting, and I don't know, like it's you come to a point where you're just kind of like expecting anything at a certain point, and with the movie, and it's I don't know, it's very exciting in that way, with like it's very delirious too, the way it's all kind of like sandwiched together. That's the thing, like something like with the husband or whatever, I feel like in a normal movie that's like maybe like the most shocking thing in the or like the most scandalous or whatever, and it's just one of the many things that just add to our confused state that we share with the characters here.
For me, it's just like, if it's something that is so heavily involved in like psychoanalysis and dreams and the mind, and like this notion of like flopping identity, it's just like only natural that like the further and further you go in, and at the end, like, I don't know, you can't have a clear-cut resolution there. It's just like when trying to understand like the human mind, or like probe into like what makes a person, or what is like what is your identity, you're not going to like it's impossible to solve that sort of dilemma.
It's the only way out is through type of thinking,
I do want to read a little bit of Cope here from the contemporary review by Pauline Kael, who kind of likes it, but like doesn't really get it, and then is really mad at other people for liking it more.
A classic position to take.
And I have to say, like, what she writes about it's my favorite type of Kael, because I love the writing, and like if it was about a different movie, I would be like, you're goddamn right, and then it's like, oh, you just don't understand Persona. She says, it may be that an open puzzle movie like this one, which affects some people very profoundly, permits them to project onto it so much of themselves that what they think the movie is about has very little to do with what happens on the screen. This kind of projection, which we used to think of as the pre-critical responsiveness of the mass audience, is now common in the educated audience. People can be heard saying that they didn't worry about whether it was good or bad, that they just let it happen to them. And if the educated audience is now coming around to the larger audience's way of seeing movies, I would suggest that they are also being sold. Stuck page. They are also being sold in the same way as larger audiences. That advertising and the appearance of critical consensus it gives to certain movies are what led people to let certain prestigious movies just happen to them, just as larger audience lets an oversized musical spoof like Thoroughly Modern Millie happen to them. Awful reference, by the way. Nobody remembers that. She could have said Chitty Chitty Bang Bang there. The idea that art should be experienced, not criticized. there seems to be little sense that critical faculties are involved in experience, and that if they are not involved, advertising determines what is accepted as art.
She really goes off the rails there. It feels like she's not even talking about Persona
It feels
at
like
all.
she's talking about a totally different movie that she's mad about people liking, and no one was going to read that essay, so she was like, I'll put this part in the Persona review because people are hot on Persona, and I'm not that hot on it, you know?
Also, I have to point out, you know, why are your pages stuck together in the Polly and Kel
Yeah,
book? Were
exactly.
you doing a little bit of
Yeah.
irresponsible reading there? Me and JT were just
Malcolm and I
smiling at
just-
each other over that.
Stared
Just
at a glance, trying not to giggle as hard as possible.
why is this I only know one reason why pages are stuck together. That's the only reason I know.
Look, she recalls the monologue in the page after that, right?
It is funny the way she talks, because it's like, I don't think like mainstream audiences let movies happen. That's something that they rarely do. They come in with like very specific expectations of what they want, and if it's not delivered, I feel like they're disappointed. I don't know if it was different back then, you know, but it's just yeah, but like she does have some salient points there, you know, that it's some good writing.
It's some good writing. Pauline Kael, good on you, you old hag.
Hey, you said your piece, you know what I mean? A lot of people, you know, they don't have any opinions, so...
I remember a very condescending Jerry Lewis once said, Pauline Kael, she's a very qualified critic. Very qualified.
That's better in, like, Jerry voice, too. Just him saying qualified.
Yeah, in serious Jerry voice, like when Jerry's, you know, when I was making The Bellboy, it was a very serious, laborious process. And Pauline Kael, she's a very qualified film critic. But yeah, I going back to Persona, I think that this is a movie that has gotten so much better for me over time as I learn more about cinema and not just see its influence, but see how much it has influenced my own viewings. You know, like I feel like Persona has created shorthand in a way that few films do. And it creates shorthand beyond what Bergman does as a stylist or a thinker. It's like, oh, that's the Persona shot in terms of like one of those mirror type shots. And I really just think that as a film about films and what they can do to a person's psyche without being a movie magic movie it's a tight rope to walk, but I think that Bergman pulls it off wonderfully here because the film within the film here, it's not like it's angelic, it's not like it's baby Bergman being born. I'm gonna go ahead and say that is the point of view of the aborted little boy that she was gonna have, and that this is like, you could read it as Bergman being religious and anti-abortion even, and that's a pretty harsh reading, you know. Like I don't necessarily agree with it, and obviously I don't agree with that point of view. The flippantness with which like the character talks about abortion and the way that he portrays Alma as kind of a foolish girl concerned with trifling things, working as a nurse, where the more psychologically damaged Elizabeth at least is treated with the respect of a high artist. I just think that there's something potentially really damning about it and traumatic, and it's a film that is like based out of a traumatic incident, and it spurs so many more. I just think that it's a film that contains, you know, not just an entire person's psyche, but it's almost like a rough taking the temperature of the movie-going public's psyche over the last half century or even more up to that point. And it's a film that continues to grow, not just for me, but for audiences. I really hope it continues to be taught as like a almost intro to avant-garde art for people. And I really think that like no film education is complete without Persona. So I'm going 5 bullets on Persona. it's a very chalk result. You know, the over underline was like a 4.5 and a half. How would you do those half points for gamble?
Eddie, I was literally thinking about this. This is kind of disrupt the flow, but
No, go for it.
because I saw you rate May December 3 stars, and I was like, damn, I knew Eddie was going to go under 4 stars on May December.
Yeah.
But I would have thought 3.5 rather than 3. You know what I mean?
You know what's funny?
yeah.
You are a very good handicapper because I switched it to 3.5 and then switched it back down.
Oh,
so I've been back and forth.
Well,
I've been May December is a very like high 3, low 3.5 for me.
Yeah. Well, like I just knew like Eddie's gonna like undercut a little bit there. I just knew that at least that was gonna happen, and I was just like,
I don't have the home field advantage.
yeah. You know, not being a straight male move. No, I'm just kidding. Like I was like, dang, I should open up a gambling service for like your friends' letterbox ratings. You know what I mean? You know, like I should just like,
Yeah, the half point. I guess you got to go like 0.25s and 0.75s for the over unders.
Yeah.
If you want to get those like the way that you do half points in sports gambling. So you could have put my over under like if you were a handicapper like trying to make money off of people.
Yeah.
You probably would have put the line at like 3.25.
Yeah.
Because it's like over or under. There's a good chance you're still getting your money back at 3 or whatever.
well, here as the someone who was hypothetically run the service, I guess I would, you know, it's like you would have the 0.25s there, but you'd also, some lines would just be 3.5. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you get a push.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. So I think I would set that one at, there's a lot of hype on May, December. You know, Netflix released, so a lot of people saw it. A lot of people are talking about it, you know, very positively, you know, a lot of hype on it. So you use that hype to kind of fool the better. You know, maybe we could use the people who donate to our Patreon. If you want to, we could just turn that into a gambling service somehow, or I don't know.
I would love that.
I don't know how
I
to
would
do that.
honestly love that. I want to start like handicapping people's ratings because I've talked about this with like Josh and Alex. I'm pretty good at like Alex doesn't really do ratings anymore, but I'm pretty good at predicting Josh's ratings at this point.
Yeah.
Especially like if we watch something together, I know definitely where he's going. You know, like or even watch the same movie and talk about it for half a second. I know exactly the star rating he's going, and so I would love to be. I could get arrested for insider trading, fucking handicapping Josh's lines for the Sleazoids Discord.
Maybe this is a way to popularize our public image. It's like, oh, Eddie's bet on it, like just you specifically, like, oh, we could bet on, you know, Eddie just saw the Jungle Book, 2.5 stars over under, you know what I mean? Incentivize people to pay attention to what we say about movies.
Yeah, we don't reveal the star ratings until the episode, so that way, it's
Like, so it's put a gambling aspect to it, so you know, more people get into it. It's I don't know. I'm learning the ways of the modern world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you know, it's something. It's just something I thought about.
The line for every single movie for Colin Brinkman is 4.95, and it's like under plus $1 million, over minus $1 million.
That's something you throw in a parlay just to like just increase it a little bit, like the minus.
Just like, all right, I'll throw like
10.
10. I'll throw 10 Brinkman 5 stars into this parlay real quick. It'll bump it up like plus 50 odds.
And then like Brinkman gives a movie 4 stars. It's like, fuck, I lost the house. I'm gonna kill myself.
This is for the real heads out there.
Oh my god.
He's enough. See, we got to get personalities known for their ratings. To bet on.
No,
See?
absolutely. I love this idea of because like gambling becoming legal, it's you have to figure out ways to exploit the market while you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's what gambling's all about, is finding ways to exploit the market. And I think that, you know, handicapping letterbox scores is a great way to do it. We really got to open up the sports book. So let's say, you know what? I haven't looked at what Malcolm JT, have you seen Malcolm's log yet for Persona this time?
I haven't put it.
You haven't put it?
I haven't.
Okay,
I haven't seen
so JT, I am going to be the handicapper here, and you will be the better. I'm going to place the line for Malcolm's Persona rating at 4.75. Are you going over or under?
You're gonna have to get me into the gambling world here.
Okay,
What is
so
this?
basically, if you think Malcolm So I think basically that Malcolm's either going to give it a 4.5 or a 4.75, right?
Okay.
Or sorry, a 4.5 or a 5, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm putting the gambling line in between that, you're picking whether his score is higher than 4.75, which would be 5, or lower, which would be 4.5 or anything lower than 4.5.
I'm gonna say under because I'm thinking 4.5. Yeah.
Okay, so you're going under. Malcolm,
Yeah.
what is your bullet rating on this?
JT, you were right. 4.5 bullets. You know what I mean?
Fuck yes.
You would have been a winner. You would have been a winner on that,
Yeah,
JT.
but see how happy JT got there. I know not everyone here, not everyone here on the podcast listens to sports or watches sports. You know what I mean? So it's like you might not understand the sports gambling epidemic that's happening right now. The stimulation that you get from sports gambling, I just thought it'd be funny if other people could experience it. Who aren't into sports, like maybe movie people with this handicapping ratings thing somehow. They got to start integrating into reality TV. I mean, I'm sure they are. I'm sure people have thought of this already, but
I'm gonna throw Malcolm's May December in a tease with the Sweet East, and the Zone of Interest. So we're getting a 1.5 point tease here. So that means Zone of Interest, the line's down to 3. Sweet East lines down to 2.5.
yeah, that's pretty good odds right there. Those are pretty good odds.
All right, Malcolm, Persona. I know you gave it a 4.5, but any final thoughts on it?
I feel like we talked a lot, but it's just like, just what I'm just surprised like how exact and like just cutting this movie is, and like how, I don't know, like every shot seems so meticulously crafted, but it flows in a way that feels, kind of natural, but also at the same time just kind of like unnatural because all this confusing stuff is happening, and I don't know, it's a very particular mood that I feel like a lot of movies have tried to replicate, and there's definitely been some great movies out of it, but it's like this one just still kind of hits in a very specific way, and I don't know, it's just very impressive. And it your line kind of like it's modernism, like film modernism and like psychoanalysis kind of clashing. It does kind of feel like a perfect moment there, and for Bergman to kind of go out of his wheelhouse and kind of just having the know-how to create something like that, to have his finger on the pulse, kind of show people, I'm not just wild strawberries. I'm not an old man contemplating on life. I know what's going on right now. You know what I mean?
They thought I was wild strawberries.
They thought I was that old guy in wild strawberries. Nah, man, I'm still out here, just like you, So Bergman's, like we've said before, and we've kind of discussed this, it is like Bergman, him being like an early cinephile, gateway, people are like, maybe sometimes are like dismiss him as they get deeper into stuff, but he's a guy that, he'll keep surprising you if you let him. So
yeah, and we do have an email about the whole Bergman reputation thing that we'll get to in a minute here, but JT, final thoughts and a rating here.
I'm gonna go 5 bullets. Again, it's hard to like sell or like talk about, like, I feel like Persona became, like, especially in terms of like how it's been parodied so much, like Bergman seems to dominate the mode of like an art house movie, which is very funny because, or I mean, especially like European art house, which is funny because that's such like a nebulous, like, how do you define that as like a genre? I mean, obviously like abstraction, like less like narrative presence, things like that. So it's just like it's very funny to make films that sort of define something so nebulous and that large. But within that, it's just like you have this sort of stereotypical impression of like what like the dour, serious art house film is, and Bergman has done that. Like, obviously you mentioned like Winter Light, things that are a little bit more like heavy, dealing with like religion, all that type of jazz. He knows, he has many different styles of play. Bergman can do it all. This, it's just like, I don't know, it feels like such, you bring up like hoping it's still
continues to be taught in film school is like absolutely, because it's such a major foundational text there, and I feel like is also like, if you show this to like a young person or whatnot, subverts all expectations of like what like serious like filmmaking, like quote unquote, should be, because like it's a tight like 82 minutes, like it's like, I mean, I don't want to say like playful and fun necessarily, but it has like an energy and a vitality to it that like if you're going into this as someone who's just like getting into film, I feel like it shakes a lot of expectations of what like more avant-garde and experimental work can be.
Totally. Yeah, it is. This movie's, not that this makes it any better or worse, but this movie's still like kind of hip, right? Like you could show it to a young kid now and it still would, it would kind of rattle them a little bit. That's kind of impressive.
Depends how young the kid is. You might have to leave the room for a little bit. Or hit the fast forward, I guess.
Showing kid. I wonder if someone's got to be doing that, showing their kids, like young kids, like 3-year-olds, like a bunch of art house movies. Like, I wonder if it makes them a genius or a psycho. I don't know. I wonder what happens.
Genius or psycho?
The only two options.
It's like that Mark Zuckerberg poster for Social Network, but with Bergman. You don't get to 60 films without making a few enemies.
Rosenbaum.
We'll be right back on Extended Clip. And we're back on Extended Clip. Time for a little email. extendedclippodcast@gmail.com is where you can reach us. This one comes from Jake. It says, "Hey guys, love the show and hope you're all doing well." Oh, well, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Next email. He continues. Sorry. Ingmar and Brian, referring to our last couple episodes here on Persona and Dahlia by Brian De Palma. Ingmar and Brian are two of my absolute boys, and I'd love to go on about both of them, but I won't get greedy with your time. My question: I get the sense that Bergman has a reputation for being a sort of baby's first auteur, and at least speaking anecdotally, it's true. I remember being a freshman in college and watching stuff like Persona and Through a Glass Darkly on my laptop after getting serious about film and seeking out the stronger stuff. It was formative, and I'm glad I did it, but in hindsight, I feel like it's odd to have zeroed in on this severe modernist Swedish guy as a sort of trail guide when I was essentially just starting out. It seems like learning to swim by jumping in the deep end. Unless I'm just projecting here, what is it about Bergman that has made him an appropriate entry point to bigger international/art house worlds? And if you don't think that's the case, is there anyone who has supplanted him in that role? Thank you, Jake. Well, that's a very good question. So I think popularity is unfortunately going to be your answer for why he is held in such high esteem in terms of a starting point, because I would agree that like a nascent cinephile, Bergman probably isn't the thing to show them, especially with history on your side. In the 60s, maybe, if all you've seen is Hollywood movies up till that point, yeah, I think Persona or any of Bergman's work is going to kind of blow your mind. But like if you're growing up these days and you've seen, your American indies and all that, and you want to take a step deeper, I don't know if Bergman's really the guy if you're like 17 years old or whatever. I think it does make more sense to wait till you're a little matured.
I think it's also interesting because like the way you said, like if you only seen Hollywood movies and then you saw a Bergman, that would really kind of like, you know, maybe give you a perspective shift. And like, I think obviously like part of the reason Bergman's so popular is like how he was perceived back then too, you know what I mean? And then like you know, of him being like one of the big international names, you know, that's, you know, somewhat popular in America.
A genius and a tramp.
Yeah, and it kind of like, I think part of the reason like why Bergman, I mean, obviously the quality of his films is why he's talked about, but it's like part of that is like to fully understand everything. It's like, well, like, you know, obviously we said Woody Allen was influenced by Bergman, and there's tons of others people who were influenced by Bergman, and kind of like by continuing to watch his movies, you're kind of tapping into the same history that everyone else kind of experienced in a strange way. So it's like, since he was so popular back then, I feel like that's why, you know, he still is now, just because, you know, you're trying to, you know, approximate, you know, how people digested things. But obviously that's not something you need to do, you know, anymore, especially with the freedom of the internet. You could really get into movies in many different ways. And I guess is he a good starting point? It's like, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, where are kids starting nowadays? Because it's like, obviously, I guess kids are getting into art films through like A24 movies, but that's not like the comparison.
Well, I hear the kids are doing TikTok these days. So, you know, I don't know if Bela Tar or Ho Xiaoshen are really raking in the clicks on TikTok.
Yeah.
But who knows what they're doing.
Well, I was gonna say, because it's like he asked the question like, what is getting like people into like international and art house? It's like probably like A24 films is the most realistic answer, but it's like Bergman's kind of like the guy you watch after you watch those A24 films. I'm sure there were like films you're like that kind of were like a gateway into like another gateway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that about the new Hollywood stuff that was so influenced by European art films, you know, like, oh, you thought Easy Rider was crazy. Check out some of these like 60s European films, you know, they'll really blow your mind.
Yeah, it feels. I definitely agree with what you're saying, Malcolm, in terms of like A24 style movies, like being like a gateway into things that are a little bit more strange. Like, the comparison feels like correct, but I don't know. They just feel like different. Like, I don't know if what not all of A24's movies are like hardcore art house output. So I feel like that's where I feel like there's a little bit of a challenge, and I feel like it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to consider in my mind. I feel like now I think I have ideas of filmmakers who would be a good starting point. Like, I feel like Kiarostami would be someone who's like has like a richness to him and is like modern in a way that I feel like you could tap into.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, you could put it just like in the festival circuit contemporarily. You know, Bergman is just the guy who lasted 70 years. Like, his movies played New York Film Festival when they came out, for the most part, and it's like, or not all of them or whatever, but at least Persona was a NIF American premiere, and it's like, look at the filmmakers at NIF this year. You got Hong Sang-soo putting stuff out every year, Angela Shainalik, and you know, some Yorgos Lanthimos and Wang Bing and Todd Haynes and Sofia Coppola, and it makes sense. There are always going to be like the class of filmmakers that are both the kind of more like one step away from mainstream and then one step further deep into the art house. And I feel like the kind of wrap up festivals like NIF are a good way to kind of get a vibe check on who those filmmakers are at this present day. Like Sofia Coppola, you know, it's makes sense to see her as like a historical analog for the more artsy Hollywood movies in the 70s that maybe people saw them and then they seeked out the Bergman and Godard films that influenced them, the way that people will watch Sofia Coppola and then maybe eventually watch both Antonioni and Chantal Ackerman, you know.
Yeah.
Availability and streaming, is still a big part of this because, there's a lot of people who, a lot of downloaders out there. We're all downloaders. We get our files whenever we want. We're kind of, we're demanding like that.
I want my movies and I want them now.
But there's a lot of people who just the idea of that is just too much effort for them, to learn how to do that. It's just not something that they're willing to do. And so streaming is still a big part of it. So I feel like Bergman still kind of remains in that popularity just because you could watch like 20 of his movies on Criterion, and kind of like these Criterion European art house staples are still pretty popular and kind of serving the same roles that they always have, like Godard, Truffaut, all the classic names. I feel like it's still somewhat similar in that, just due to availability. But there's like you could also go Kiarostami with that too, like JT said. Yeah, I think a lot of the criticism sometimes with Bergman is that like it's like maybe there isn't enough focus on like non-European countries or whatever, and that's a valid complaint. Go watch those movies; those are out there. You know what I mean? But I feel like Bergman, I guess for like what's a good starting point, I feel like Anywhere is a good starting point. Maybe I'm thinking too broadly with this.
No, it all depends on the viewer, like what your basis is. If you say, I want to get deeper into movies, as it were, to quote both Pauline Kael and Yo La Tengo, you can just like go based off what you like. Like, it doesn't even have to be movie-wise. You could say, oh, I don't even watch movies, so how do I do that? Well, what TV do you like? What books do you like? What music do you like? There's always going to be aesthetic modes for you to chase. So, someone who loves to read My Year of Rest and Relaxation and their favorite musical artist is Playboy Cardi, like, I'm not going to tell them like Bergman is your guy. Like, you should get into film through Bergman. I might say something more like I don't know, fucking Edward Yang, or someone slightly more contemporary about cultural alienation and stuff like that. With more, contemporary popular sensibilities. So maybe even Sofia Coppola. But then again, if you like Woody Allen and reading about philosophy, I'm going to tell you to fucking watch Persona right away. Or reading about psychoanalysis, If Frasier's your favorite TV show.
If you're into women, check out Persona.
Yeah, exactly. If you're into like poly play, check out Smiles of a Summer Night.
Play. I love calling it play.
Play is the worst. God,
fun and games for all this playing around.
God, one of my least favorite things. But yeah, no, Malcolm, you're right about like the entry points kind of being the same though. I mean, when I was getting more serious about like art house films, the streamer I was using was back when the Hulu Criterion collaboration was as strong as it ever was. And yeah, it was like the splash page on that was like, hey, get into your Kurosawa, Bergman, Fellini, and Truffaut. And it's like, all right, I'll check them all out. And I like, it's really easy to just fucking like, also, it's not that big of a deal if you watch a 90-minute movie and it doesn't move you. Like, big deal. You watched an artistic groundbreaking thing and it wasn't really for you. Next, it's not a big deal. Like, so if you don't love Persona, then just like zag away from that within the art house collection or whatever. Maybe go for a Kurosawa or an Ozu. But anyway, so I think about like the masters are probably there for a reason. There's an easy film school hot take zag to call Bergman overrated. Like, I still haven't gotten on the Fellini wavelength, to be completely honest, but it's everyone has their tastes. I'm not going to say that he shouldn't be one of those art house entry points or anything like that. But to get back to the writer's original question, yeah, I feel like the festivals are always a good way to gauge who the kind of soft and hard entry points are for the tip of the iceberg versus diving into the deepness in the abyss.
And on a much smaller level, like all this letterbox stuff or like film Twitter or whatever, like it does like kind of like incentivize film watching in like a social way.
Well, I don't know if you've heard this, but I heard some people are even performative on Letterboxd.
Well, that's if that's true, then that has to be the end of the world. If I just heard that someone's being performative, that's something that I could never conceptualize happening. So it'd be a huge shocker to me.
Next email. Fire it away.
All right, this one goes to our. It's a follow-up to our last episode that we did. It says De Palma question from Chris. Hello, boys. Being born and raised a Pennsylvanian, I get fascinated by filmmakers and artists who are also from the Keystone State and what, if anything, growing up in PA adds to their work. David Lynch famously incorporated his sensory experiences of living in the post-industrial hellscape of Philly into Eraserhead. De Palma is a similar Philly boy, but from the main line, with JT also being a born and raised Pennsylvanian and living in Philly, and Eddie newly transplanted to the city of brotherly love. I'm curious if you see any influence from Philly and or Pennsylvania at large in De Palma's work other than Blowout, which might be the best Philly set film. Or are there just any other Philly/PA filmmakers and films that are your favorites? JT, I'm gonna bounce this one to you first, as someone who's lived here. Outside of the locations in Blowout, do you get that Pennsylvania feeling from Mr. De Palma?
That's interesting. I feel like for me, like the Pennsylvania, I feel like categorizes in like smaller, like you can kind of divide it into like two groups. I feel like almost. I mean, I think there are obviously a lot of shades in between, but it's a state with like two huge cities, Philly and Pittsburgh, and I feel like you have like kind of a more obviously liberal like sensibility there. Philly, I feel like you have kind of the stereotype is like a South Philly kind of a guy, like kind of dumb, like Italian guy. You find those a lot of in a lot of cities, but there's the attitude of like a like underdog, pissed off guy kind of. That to me feels like the Philly vibe, and I don't know necessarily if that.
Yeah, no, De Palma is not a nobody believes in us guy. Like that's De Palma does not have that bone. He makes fun of the nobody believes in us guys.
Yeah, exactly. I think he believes in himself too much.
Yeah, no, it's because De Palma went to Hollywood and saw the belly of the beast. Like I think De Palma's just like above regionally specific cultural mindsets, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is like certainly in Blowout. I feel like there are. I'm blanking on what other movie of his I found like some type of loose, like Philly connection. But I mean, I definitely share this fascination with Chris, where it's like I'm looking for it in movies. Like Mikey and Nicky was shot in Philly and doesn't particularly look like it. I mean, it's super fucking like dark. Like that movie, so it's like, and I think it was shot like other places aside from like Philly as well, but like that's in it. I mean, the big one that people go to certainly is like Rocky, like Creed, that type of thing. Which I don't know. I've been since getting into Philly representation on film. I want to reevaluate those. But I mean, M. Night, I think, is like, of
course, all the M. Night ones,
the biggest Philly boy. And then I have to shout out like Tony Scott's Unstoppable for like that. Like that is the opposite end of like the urban Pennsylvania for me. It's like the middle of nowhere, like sort of red state PA, where you're just like a lot of like kind of woodsier. Just like I don't know, like just country suburbs bullshit.
I feel like
there.
The Deer Hunter kind of gets that. Isn't Deer Hunter?
Oh, Deer Hunter too.
Deer Hunter's Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Deer Hunter's like my favorite Pennsylvania film, probably. Just like the beginning stuff in that is so good. But other than like something like Unbreakable, which I love, just as him feeling the pulse of crime in a city, which is kind of a stereotypical thing for a movie like that. But I love the way M. Night depicts Philly in that.
I was gonna say Witness, Peter Weir, Harrison Ford movie is like very Philly. It's like I don't know. That one's a lot of fun. It's a little Amish boy witnesses a murder in the bathroom of the Amtrak station here, and then Ford is like a cop that has to go undercover in Amish country. So that is probably like the most just hardcore, like real, like Pennsylvania feeling to it, because I think there are Amish like groups like in other states. I forget where else has other big Amish populations, but I think Pennsylvania oftentimes is like, especially like Lancaster, is like that's Amish.
I was gonna say
hub.
that's where they're driving through in Kingpin, right? That's the Amish country in Kingpin.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just like, I think Witness is definitely up there in the Pennsylvania canon.
My favorite Philly film is Rocky IV, but only the Dolph Lundgren training scenes, which are all in Russia.
Does you know how like New York has like a lot of movies shot in New York, like like snowy winter New York, or like LA has like the palm tree type of vibe. Like going to Philly, like is there like kind of like, damn, I'm in a movie moment when you're walking through Philly, or is that not there? Maybe. Are you guys kind of getting what I'm describing here?
I get what you're describing because I've felt it in New York as well.
Yeah.
Like being in familiar locations from films and stuff. But for Philly, that doesn't really feel like it. I don't know. Old City a little bit because of all the historic buildings, but it doesn't really feel like I'm in a movie. It feels like I'm in a PBS documentary. You know,
That's cool. That's a movie.
but I like that too. Yeah.
When I saw like David Lynch speak when he was like signing like his like autobiography that came out, there was like some question he was answering where he was talking about like walking through Los Angeles and just like the architecture and like a particular type of tree. He was like, you get like the feeling of like being alive in like old Hollywood, like kind of a feeling. And I definitely, that's something that like resonated like hardcore when I was living out there. And it's something that I don't really feel like I'm in a movie in Philly. But I do feel like the sense of like colonial history in like Old City, like especially neighborhoods like near where I live, like in particular, I walk around their old buildings, like cemeteries that have men who died in like 1700s, shit like that.
Yeah.
And that does like, that evokes that time period. So I get that kind of a feeling. But again, that's pre-cinema, baby. We're cruising in the before times.
That's a good feeling. A nice historic feeling. That's good. The movie stuff might just be because so many movies shot in L.A. and New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
That's probably just it. I was trying to see if it was somewhere else.
We got one more email here
Wow.
on this
We
episode.
got a lot of
This one
questions.
comes from Eric. It says, "Hey EC, hope you're doing well and happy holidays. I just saw May December and was wondering if the same scenario happened to you with an older woman, who would you want it to be with?" He then says, "Best Eric from the Discord who still hasn't subbed yet. Sorry. I have the money, just not enough time to listen to that many podcasts.
Wow, okay,
If you guys put
interesting.
out a book or something, I'd buy that though." All right, so this guy's just like,
I don't like the tone.
fucking-
Yeah, I like that.
That was
First, you're implicating us as victims of statutory rape, and then you're just like, "Oh, by the way, I have more money than you."
okay. I mean, it's okay if you don't subscribe. You don't have to let us know. We're not like searching it up. Maybe Eddie, but I'm not. We're not searching it up and like matching your name. You don't need to. And I have answers to that question, but I'm not giving it to you. But I do have an answer to that question.
Yeah, you do have to pay for the answer.
The answer might be too specific. It might not. You just be like, "Who is that?" And I'd be like, "Well, you wanted an answer."
Malcolm is thinking of a very particular teacher he had in the 6th grade.
No, but that was one of the. That was like They were considered. You know what I mean? But not.
Considering your answer,
That was a top 3 consideration answer. So you're
no,
not wrong.
I also did a lot of deep consideration on this, but unfortunately, this is a public episode, so
Yeah.
you're gonna have to pay for the answer on that one. Sorry, Eric. I know money's not really a concern for you, so it's like
just naming people
not that
from
big
my
of a deal.
childhood on the show. No, I can't do that.
JT, I also assume you do not have an answer for this question.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna respectfully decline. For once, I'm gonna take the high road.
I'm gonna plead the fifth, as it were. I'm gonna plead the fifth grader.
Great, that's a good word. I think he'll subscribe now. After that, after hearing that,
Yeah.
that's. I just heard a cha-ching hit the Patreon after that.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's extended clip. Of course, donate to the Patreon. $5 a month gets you an extra episode every single week. Our last bonus episode was on De Palma's The Black Dahlia, and the next one is going to be on Todd Solondz's Happiness. We're getting freaky lately here on Extended Clip. And you can of course always reach out to us, extendedclippodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on the socials, all that bullshit, and we'll see you next time, babies.
Please put down your hands, 'cause I see you.